The most catastrophic military operation in galactic history began with Admiral Blixtorp trying to find a bathroom. Not just any bathroom, mind you, but one that could accommodate his species' rather peculiar digestive requirements. The Hydrozakians, you see, had evolved on a planet where water was so scarce that their ancestors had developed the charming ability to absorb moisture through their skin. This meant that when nature called, it called loudly, and with the urgency of a fire alarm in a fireworks factory. Blixtorp was floating in his command pod aboard the starship Moisture Harvester, desperately scanning star charts for the nearest rest stop, when his navigation officer, Lieutenant Dripkins, made the discovery that would doom them all. "Admiral!" Dripkins squeaked, his gill slits fluttering with excitement. "I found something incredible, a planet absolutely drowning in H2O. Now, to understand the magnitude of this moment, you must appreciate that the Hydrozakians came from Zerothia Prime, a world where finding a puddle was cause for planetary celebration. Their entire civilization had been built around the desperate pursuit of moisture. They had wars over dewdrops. They worshipped humidity. Their most sacred text was essentially a very long poem about the theoretical properties of liquid water. So when Dripkins announced his discovery, every membrane in the ship started vibrating with pure, unadulterated greed. "How much water are we talking about?" Blixtorp demanded, temporarily forgetting his bladder situation. "Sir, according to these readings, 71% of the planet's surface is covered in the stuff. There are oceans, Admiral. Actual oceans." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of several dozen alien hearts skipping beats in perfect synchronization. Blixtorp's eyes widened until they looked like dinner plates. "Oceans," he whispered, as if speaking the word too loudly might make them disappear. "Sweet, merciful moisture. We're going to be rich." What none of them realized, of course, was that they had just made the kind of assumption that typically precedes the phrase, famous last words. The Hydrozakians had never encountered liquid water in quantities larger than a coffee cup. Their understanding of H2O came entirely from theoretical physics and desperate wishful thinking. Chief Science Officer Splasherton was already running calculations on his hydrocalculator, a device that looked suspiciously like an abacus made of dried kelp. "Admiral, if we could harvest even 1% of this planet's water reserves, we could supply our entire homeworld for—" His voice cracked with emotion. "For almost 3 whole days." 3 days? The bridge crew gasped collectively. This might not sound impressive to you, dear listener, but to a species that rationed water by the molecule, 3 days of abundance was practically immortality. Blixtorp stood up so quickly that he bumped his head on the low ceiling of his command pod, producing a sound like a wet fish slapping concrete. "Splasherton, begin immediate preparations for Operation Liquid Liberation." "Aye, Admiral. Should I alert the High Command?" "No!" Blixtorp's voice echoed through the ship like a foghorn in a cathedral. "This discovery stays between us until we've secured the water. I will not have some bureaucratic gill-breathers in fancy offices taking credit for my find." And so began the chain of decisions that would later be studied in military academies across 17 star systems as a textbook example of how overconfidence can lead to spectacular failure. The first problem, though none of them realized it at the time, was their intelligence gathering. The Hydrozakians had intercepted what they believed were primitive broadcasts from Earth. Unfortunately, their translation matrix had been calibrated for mineral-based life forms, not carbon-based ones. When they analyzed human television signals, they concluded that Earth was populated by incredibly slow-moving, barely sentient creatures whose primary activity was standing still and making incomprehensible mouth noises. "Look at this footage, Admiral," Dripkins said, projecting images of what appeared to be humans having a conversation. "These natives barely move. They just wave their appendages around and make sounds." What they were actually watching was a soap opera, but their senses interpreted the dramatic pauses as evidence of sluggish mental processing. Splasherton nodded sagely. Clearly primitive. Notice how they seem incapable of rapid movement? And those bizarre coverings they wear? Probably some sort of protective shell against their own planet's harsh environment. The protective shells were, of course, clothing, but to beings who had never encountered fabric, human fashion looked like evolutionary armor. Perfect! Blixtorp gurgled with satisfaction. Slow, stupid, and probably afraid of water, judging by all those shells. This will be like taking moisture from a sleeping infant. The second problem was their technology. The Hydrozakians were incredibly advanced in the field of water conservation, but embarrassingly primitive in almost everything else. Their ships were essentially flying sponges, designed to absorb and retain every molecule of precious liquid they encountered. Their weapons were sophisticated irrigation systems. Their armor was designed primarily to prevent moisture loss, not incoming damage. They had spent so many millennia focused on finding water that they had never bothered to develop the technology to actually fight anyone who might object to having their water stolen. "Admiral," reported Chief Engineer Moistnik from the engine room, "the aqua drainers are fully operational. We can suck up approximately 47 gallons per minute. 47 gallons per minute. To put this in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to draining an Olympic swimming pool in about 14,000 hours, or just under 2 years. But to the Hydrozakians, this was the engineering marvel of the century. "Magnificent," Blixtorp declared. "At that rate, we'll have completely drained one of their smaller oceans in only—" He paused while Splasherton did some frantic calculations. "Carry the two. Multiply by the moisture coefficient. Approximately 47 million years." The bridge erupted in cheers. "You see, the Hydrozakians had no concept of large bodies of water. The biggest body of liquid they had ever seen was a puddle roughly the size of a dinner plate, and that had been considered a natural wonder worthy of pilgrimage. The idea that Earth's oceans contained roughly 1.386 billion cubic kilometers of water was so far beyond their comprehension that their brains simply refused to process it. They thought Earth's oceans were probably about as big as a bathtub, maybe 2 bathtubs if they were being generous. As the moisture harvester approached Earth's solar system, Blixtorp gathered his crew for what he believed would be a simple briefing on the most profitable piracy operation in galactic history. "Attention, crew," he announced over the ship's intercom. "In approximately 6 rotations, we will arrive at the water planet. Our mission is simple. Locate the nearest water reservoir, deploy our aqua drainers, and extract every drop of moisture we can carry." Chief Tactical Officer Gurgleton raised a webbed hand. "Sir, what if the natives resist?" Blixtorp let out what could generously be called a laugh, but sounded more like a garbage disposal trying to process a rubber duck. "Resist? Gurgleton, these creatures move slower than continental drift. By the time they realize what's happening, we'll be halfway back to Zerothia Prime." "But sir," Lieutenant Bubbleton interjected nervously, "what if there are more of them than we calculated?" "Bubbleton, according to our analysis, the entire planet has maybe 3,000 or 4,000 inhabitants scattered across vast distances. They're probably too busy being slow and primitive to even notice us." The crew nodded enthusiastically. After all, their long-range sensors had detected what appeared to be only a few thousand heat signatures. What they didn't realize was that their sensors were calibrated for Zerothian biology, which operated at much higher temperatures than human bodies. They were literally only seeing people with fevers. The actual human population of roughly 8 billion souls was completely invisible to their instruments. "One more thing," Blixtorp added, his voice taking on the tone of a commander addressing troops before a glorious battle. "Remember, we are Hydrozakians, masters of moisture, lords of liquid. These primitive creatures have no idea what they're dealing with." The crew cheered with the enthusiasm of beings who had never actually fought anyone, ever. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. E. Millicent Frothworth was having the kind of day that makes people question their career choices. She was a marine biologist stationed at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and she had just spent 14 hours trying to convince a committee of government officials that the strange readings from her deep-sea monitoring equipment were not the result of atmospheric fluctuations or solar interference. "Gentlemen," she said for the 7th time that day, her patience wearing thinner than Arctic ice, "these sonar readings indicate the presence of artificial structures approximately 200 kilometers off the coast. Large, moving artificial structures." General Harwick, a man whose understanding of oceanography was roughly equivalent to a goldfish's grasp of quantum physics, waved dismissively. "Dr. Frothworth, I'm sure it's just whales. Very large whales. Possibly musical whales." "General, whales don't emit electromagnetic signatures consistent with advanced propulsion systems. Maybe they're really advanced whales." Dr. Frothworth closed her eyes and took a deep breath, fighting the urge to explain marine biology using small words and interpretive dance. "Sir, the signature patterns suggest technology that is, well, it's unlike anything in our databases." This was, of course, a massive understatement. The Hydrozakian ships were so utterly alien in their design principles that human sensors kept misidentifying them as weather patterns. Captain Rodrigo Saltwater of the USS Neptune's Fork was experiencing similar frustrations with his superiors. As the commander of the Navy's most advanced deep-sea research vessel, he had been tracking the anomalous contacts for 3 days, and his reports were being met with the kind of bureaucratic enthusiasm typically reserved for tax audits. "Admiral," he said into his secure comm unit, "I'm telling you, these aren't natural phenomena. They're moving in formation. They're maintaining depth at precisely 200 meters, and they appear to be scanning the ocean floor." "Salt water," came the crackling reply. "Have you been eating the cooking again? You know what that stuff does to people's imagination." "Sir, my entire crew has witnessed these contacts. Sonar technician Rodriguez has been tracking them for 72 hours straight. Rodriguez needs more sleep and possibly therapy." What Captain Saltwater couldn't know was that his sonar was picking up the Hydrozakian fleet as they descended toward what they believed would be their first small-scale water collection point. The aliens had selected the Pacific Ocean for their initial test run because their sensors had identified it as the planet's largest water collection, which they estimated to be roughly the size of a large swimming pool. The reality was somewhat different. As the moisture harvester and its accompanying fleet of 12 collection ships approached the Pacific surface, Admiral Blixtorp was practically vibrating with anticipation. Through the viewing portal, he could see the vast blue expanse stretching to the horizon, and his brain was having trouble processing what his eyes were telling him. "Splasherton," he said slowly, his voice carrying the tone of someone who was beginning to suspect they had made a miscalculation. "Exactly how large did we calculate this water reservoir to be?" Splasherton consulted his hydro-calculator again, his webbed fingers dancing across the dried kelp beads. "According to our measurements, approximately 40 cubic meters, sir. Perhaps 50 if we account for tidal variations." Blixtorp stared at the endless ocean stretching beyond the horizon. His species had never developed words for quantities this large. The closest concept in their language was unreasonably moist, but even that seemed inadequate. "Splasherton," he said very quietly, "I don't think that's 50 cubic meters. Sir, I think we may have underestimated the scale of this operation." Before Splasherton could respond, Chief Engineer Moistnick's voice crackled over the intercom. "Admiral, we're detecting massive quantities of H2O below us. The sensors are going insane." And that was when things started to go wrong. Very, very wrong. The first sign of trouble came when Lieutenant Dripkins attempted to deploy the primary aqua drainer. The device, designed to extract water from small pools and underground springs, made contact with the Pacific Ocean and immediately suffered what could politely be called a catastrophic sensory overload. "Admiral, Dripkins screamed over the sound of sparking electronics. The aqua drainer it's... Oh, sweet moisture, it's trying to drain the entire ocean at once. The machine, confronted with more water than it had been programmed to believe existed in the universe, did what any rational device would do. It panicked. Alarms began blaring. Lights started flashing, and somewhere deep in the ship's bowels, something important began making the kind of grinding noise that usually precedes expensive repairs. But the aqua drainer's nervous breakdown was merely the opening act in what would become the greatest comedy of errors in military history. The second sign of trouble was the discovery that Earth's water was not, in fact, pure H2O. It contained salt, lots of salt, and the Hydrozakians, who had evolved in an environment where every molecule was precious, had never encountered contaminated water before. Chief Medical Officer Dampkins was the first to realize the problem when several crew members who had volunteered to test the local water began exhibiting symptoms that could charitably be described as explosive. "Admiral," Dampkins called urgently from the medical bay, "we have a situation. The collected samples are toxic." "Toxic? Impossible. It's pure H2O." "Sir, it's H2O plus approximately 35,000 parts per million of sodium chloride, and calcium sulfate, and magnesium compounds, and... His voice rose to a panicky pitch. "Admiral, this stuff would kill us if we tried to absorb it." Blixtorp felt his moisture sacs clench with horror. "You mean we can't use this water?" "Not without extensive purification, and our filtration systems are designed for minor impurities, not this chemical nightmare." The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of dreams being crushed and the distant grinding of the still malfunctioning aqua drainer. But if the discovery of salt water was disappointing, it was nothing compared to what happened next. Dr. Frothworth, still trying to convince various government officials that something unusual was happening in the Pacific, finally decided to take matters into her own hands. She commandeered a research submersible and headed out to investigate the anomalous readings personally. What she found was a sight that would have been hilarious if it weren't so bizarre. A collection of organic-looking spacecraft attempting to vacuum the Pacific Ocean with what appeared to be giant drinking straws. "This is Marine Research Vessel Cousteau to Pacific Command," she radioed, her voice tight with scientific excitement and personal vindication. "I have visual confirmation of... Well, I have no idea what I have visual confirmation of, but it's definitely not whales. Dr. Frothworth, please don't start with the whale theories again." "No, listen to me. There are ships out here, alien ships, and they appear to be trying to drink the ocean." There was a long pause on the radio. Then, "Dr. Frothworth, I want you to return to base immediately, and I want you to schedule an appointment with the base psychologist." Meanwhile, aboard the moisture harvester, Admiral Blixtorp was learning that his problems were just beginning. The third sign of trouble arrived in the form of Chief Navigator Trickleton, who burst onto the bridge in a state of acute panic. "Admiral," he gasped, his gill slits flapping like distressed window curtains, "we've got movement in the water. Lots of movement." "Movement? What kind of movement?" "Big movement, sir. Really, really big movement. Our sensors are detecting massive life forms approaching our position." Now, what Trickleton's sensors were actually detecting were perfectly ordinary creatures by Earth standards. A pod of blue whales, a school of tuna, several dolphins, and what appeared to be a moderately sized great white shark. But to beings who had never encountered anything larger than a water beetle, these creatures registered as absolute leviathans of impossible proportions. "How big are we talking?" Blixtorp demanded. Trickleton consulted his scanner, his hands shaking. "Sir, the largest contact is approximately 30 meters long." The bridge crew screamed in unison. On Zerothia Prime, the largest predator was the feared desert salamander, which reached the terrifying length of nearly 3 inches. 30 meters? Blixtorp's voice cracked like a teenager's. What kind of monstrous death world is this place? Sir, that's not the worst part. There's a worse part. The 30-meter creature appears to be approaching us. And it's singing. Indeed, the blue whale was producing its characteristic low-frequency calls, which the Hydrozakian translation matrix interpreted as some sort of primitive war cry. It's challenging us to combat, sir. What happened next would later be remembered as the Great Pacific Panic, though the Hydrozakians called it the day the water tried to eat us. The blue whale, completely oblivious to the alien presence above it, continued its journey through its ancient migration route. But to the Hydrozakians, this looked like a deliberate attack by an impossibly massive sea monster. "Evasive maneuvers!" Blixtorp shrieked. The moisture harvester lurched to starboard, its engines whining with the effort. Unfortunately, Hydrozakian ships were designed for the careful conservation of energy, not rapid tactical movements. The vessel responded to Blixtorp's order with all the agility of a flying refrigerator, which brought them directly into the path of the tuna school. To understand what happened next, you need to know that tuna are fast, very fast. They can reach speeds of up to 70 kilometers per hour when motivated, and the sudden appearance of strange objects in their territory was definitely motivating. The fish, following their ancient instincts, scattered in all directions. Several dozen of them, each weighing upwards of 200 kilograms, collided with the Hydrozakian fleet at high speed. The impact sounded like a percussion section made entirely of sledgehammers. "We're under attack!" Someone screamed over the intercom. "The natives have weaponized their sea creatures," another voice added. Aboard collection ship number 7, Captain Moisturella was dealing with her own crisis. The ship's hull, designed to absorb water, had been functioning exactly as intended. Unfortunately, it had been absorbing salt water, and the salt was beginning to crystallize in the ship's porous walls. "Captain," Chief Engineer Dripstein reported, "the hull it's hardening. The salt is turning our absorption panels into solid rock." "What do you mean, solid rock?" "I mean we're slowly turning into a flying statue, ma'am." Indeed, the ship was gradually becoming a bizarre monument to the dangers of inadequate research. The Hydrozakian absorption technology, so effective with pure water, was being defeated by basic chemistry, but the salt crystallization was nothing compared to what was happening to collection ship number 3. Captain Puddleby had made the fatal decision to descend below the ocean's surface for more efficient water collection. What he hadn't anticipated was meeting the Pacific's local residents up close and personal. The great white shark that Trickleton had detected was actually a relatively small specimen, only about 4 meters long. By Earth standards, it was practically a minnow. But to the Hydrozakians, it looked like something that had crawled out of their species' worst nightmares. "Captain!" Sonar Officer Splishly yelled. "Massive predator approaching at high speed, estimated length 20 meters. The shark was actually only 4 meters, but terror tends to affect one's ability to measure accurately. "It's got teeth, Captain, hundreds of them. And it's fast. It's moving faster than our maximum velocity." Captain Puddleby, a being whose species had never encountered a predator more dangerous than a mildly irritated cactus, made a decision that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his life. "Ramming speed," he ordered. Collection ship number 3 accelerated toward the shark with all the menace of an angry pillow. The shark, curious about this strange new object in its territory, approached to investigate. The collision was anticlimactic. The ship's soft, spongy hull simply bounced off the shark's skin like a rubber ball hitting a brick wall. The shark, mildly annoyed, gave the ship what could only be described as a gentle love tap with its tail. Collection ship number 3 immediately began spinning like a top, its crew screaming in harmonized terror as they pinballed around the cabin. "Mayday! Mayday!" Captain Puddleby broadcast. "We're being devoured by a prehistoric death machine." The shark, having decided that the strange floating object was neither food nor threat, swam away to find something more interesting, like seaweed. But the Hydrozakian panic was spreading faster than spilled water on a dry sponge. Admiral Blixtorp, watching his fleet scatter like startled minnows, was beginning to realize that this mission was not proceeding according to plan. The ocean that was supposed to be their salvation was turning into their doom. "Status report," he demanded over the fleet communications. The responses came in a cascade of hysteria. "Ship 3 is under attack by a monster. Ship 7 is turning to stone. Ship 12's aqua drainer just exploded. Ship 5 reports hostile contact with what appears to be a military formation of aquatic creatures." The last report was referring to a school of dolphins that had decided to investigate the strange newcomers by performing their traditional greeting, synchronized swimming around the intruders while clicking and whistling cheerfully. To the Hydrozakians, this looked like a complex tactical maneuver by highly intelligent enemy forces. "Admiral," Chief Communications Officer Rippleston reported with growing panic, "I'm picking up what appears to be enemy coordination signals. They're using some kind of sophisticated sonic warfare." The enemy coordination signals were dolphin clicks, roughly equivalent to the dolphins saying, "Hey everyone, come look at these weird floating things." But perhaps the most catastrophic discovery was yet to come. Dr. Frothworth, still orbiting the alien fleet in her research submersible, had been recording everything with scientific precision. She was also, being a marine biologist with a healthy sense of irony, beginning to understand what she was witnessing. "Pacific Command, this is Cousteau," she radioed, barely suppressing laughter. "I think I know what's happening out here." "Go ahead, Dr. Frothworth. These visitors appear to be trying to steal our ocean with drinking straws." There was a long silence, then, "Come again?" "They're aliens, obviously, but I don't think they understand what an ocean is. They seem to be treating the Pacific like it's a large pond." Meanwhile, aboard the moisture harvester, Admiral Blixtorp was coming to a similar realization. "Splasherton," he said slowly, "when you calculated the size of this water reservoir, did you take into account that it might be substantially larger than our estimates?" Splasherton was frantically recalibrating his hydro calculator. "Admiral, I'm getting readings that don't make sense. According to these measurements, this single body of water contains more H2O than exists on our entire planet. That's impossible. Sir, I've checked the calculations 17 times. This ocean is approximately 1,386,000,000 cubic kilometers in volume." The bridge fell silent as every Hydrozakian brain attempted to process a number so large that their language didn't have words for it. "How much is a billion?" someone whispered. "More than a lot," another voice replied helpfully. Blixtorp felt his moisture sacs contract with a combination of awe and terror. They had come to steal a cup of water and found an ocean. They had prepared for a minor theft and stumbled into the water reserves of a god, but the true scope of their miscalculation was only beginning to dawn on them. Chief Science Officer Splasherton, still running calculations, made another discovery that sent chills through his semi-aquatic spine. "Admiral," he said in a voice barely above a whisper, "there's something else. This isn't the only ocean." What do you mean?" "I mean there are more of them. My sensors are detecting at least 4 other major water bodies of similar magnitude. The Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, and Southern Oceans had just announced their existence to beings who thought they had discovered the universe's largest puddle. 5 oceans?" Blixtorp's voice cracked like thin ice. "This planet has 5 oceans? Sir, that's still not the worst part." At this point, Blixtorp was beyond surprise. He had reached that zen-like state of disaster acceptance that comes just before complete nervous breakdown. "Tell me." "The primitive natives, they're not primitive, and there are a lot more of them than we calculated." Indeed, Splasherton's recalibrated sensors were finally picking up human heat signatures properly. Cities were appearing on his displays like stars coming out at sunset. Millions of stars. Billions of stars. "How many natives?" Splasherton Approximately, oh dear, approximately 8 billion of them, sir. The bridge crew began making noises that sounded like a choir of deflating balloons. 8 billion! Blixtorp shrieked. We planned for 3,000! Sir, they also appear to have developed what I can only describe as ridiculously advanced technology. I'm detecting aircraft, surface vessels, and what appear to be monitoring stations all around us. This was the moment when Admiral Blixtorp realized that they had not discovered an uninhabited water world ripe for harvesting. They had stumbled into someone else's swimming pool and were surprised to find it occupied. The final straw came when Chief Tactical Officer Gurgleton reported that their presence had been detected. Admiral, I'm picking up focus scanner beams from multiple surface installations. They know we're here. Are they targeting us? Unknown, sir, but they're definitely watching us. What was actually happening was that every maritime monitoring station in the Pacific was tracking the strange contacts, and several military installations were quietly moving to DEFCON 3. The humans weren't panicking, but they were definitely paying attention. Dr. Frothworth, meanwhile, had become the first human being to make diplomatic contact with an alien species, though neither side realized it at the time. She had maneuvered her submersible close enough to one of the Hydrozakian ships to establish radio contact. Her first attempt at communication went something like this. Unknown vessel. This is Dr. Millicent Frothworth of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Please identify yourself. Aboard collection ship number 9, Communications Officer Drizzleton received what his equipment interpreted as aggressive sonic weapons fire. "Captain!" he screamed. "The natives are attacking us with some kind of auditory warfare." Captain Moistkins, already stressed beyond his species' normal limits, made a command decision that would echo through history. "Return fire," he ordered. "Sir, we don't have weapons." "Then improvise." What followed was the first and only time in recorded history that an alien species attempted to conduct warfare using irrigation equipment. Collection ship number 9 aimed its primary aqua drainer at Dr. Frothworth's submersible and activated what they hoped would be a devastating water-based attack. Instead, they sprayed approximately 12 gallons of salt water at her vessel with all the force of a garden sprinkler. Dr. Frothworth watched in fascination as the alien ship essentially gave her submarine a gentle rinse. "Pacific Command," she radioed. "I think they're trying to communicate." "How can you tell?" "They just washed my windows." The situation was rapidly becoming too absurd for anyone to take seriously, but the Hydrozakians were still operating under the assumption that they were engaged in mortal combat with technologically superior forces. Admiral Blixtorp, receiving panicked reports from across his fleet, finally made the decision that every military commander dreads. "All ships," he broadcast, "retreat! Retreat! Abort Operation Liquid Liberation!" But retreating, it turned out, was easier said than done. The Hydrozakian ships, designed for careful moisture collection rather than rapid tactical withdrawal, were having trouble extracting themselves from the ocean. Several vessels had become so waterlogged that they could barely achieve neutral buoyancy. Collection ship number 4 had developed what Chief Engineer Sogsworth could only describe as acute hull saturation. The vessel was so full of absorbed water that it was beginning to sink. "Captain," Sogsworth reported, "we're taking on water faster than we can process it. The absorption chambers are at capacity. Can't we stop absorbing?" "Sir, we're Hydrozakians. We can't stop absorbing any more than we can stop breathing." Indeed, the ship's entire hull was designed around their species' natural ability to absorb moisture. Asking it to stop was like asking a sponge to become waterproof. Collection ship number 4 began its descent toward the ocean floor with the dignity of a falling brick. But the sinking ship was merely one disaster among many. Collection ship number 8 had encountered a blue whale calf, which the crew had interpreted as a juvenile megapredator. In their panic to escape, they had somehow managed to entangle their aquadrainer in their own propulsion system. The ship was now spinning in slow circles, spraying water in all directions like the world's most inefficient lawn sprinkler, while the whale calf watched with the detached interest of a creature that had seen stranger things on Tuesday. Collection ship number 12 had suffered a complete navigation failure after its pilot, Lieutenant Puddleton, had panicked at the sight of a sea turtle and accidentally programmed the ship's autopilot to fly directly into the sun. The vessel was currently heading away from Earth at maximum velocity, its crew screaming prayers to various moisture deities. Admiral Blixtorp, watching his fleet disintegrate in real time, was beginning to understand that this disaster would require some creative explanation when they returned to Zerothia Prime, assuming, of course, that they managed to return at all. "Splasherton," he said wearily, "what's our current status?" "Well, sir, Ship 4 is sinking, Ship 8 is malfunctioning, Ship 12 is leaving the solar system, Ship 3 is still being terrorized by that shark, Ship 7 has turned into a salt sculpture, and Ships 5, 6, 9, 10, and 11 are reporting various degrees of catastrophic system failure. And the moisture harvester, our primary aquadrainer, has suffered what I can only describe as a complete existential crisis, sir. It keeps trying to drain the entire ocean and then shutting down when it realizes how impossible that is." Blixtorp closed his eyes and tried to remember why he had thought this was a good idea. The answer, of course, was hubris. The same hubris that had led countless civilizations throughout the galaxy to assume that their superior technology and intellect would inevitably triumph over primitive local conditions. It was the same hubris that had led the Galactic Insurance Consortium to develop a specific clause for losses due to catastrophic overconfidence in the face of environmental factors beyond the policyholders' comprehension. The Hydrozakians were about to become a case study. Dr. Frothworth, meanwhile, had been joined by Captain Saltwater's research vessel, and together they were documenting what would later be recognized as first contact between humanity and an alien species. "Captain," Dr. Frothworth radioed, "are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing something that looks like a combination of marine disaster and comedy show," Saltwater replied. "What exactly are these things?" "Based on their behavior, I'd say they're aquatic aliens who have never seen a large body of water before. They seem to be operating under the assumption that our ocean is much smaller than it actually is." "You mean they don't know how big the Pacific is?" "Captain, I don't think they know how big water is." Indeed, as the two human vessels watched, the alien fleet was demonstrating a level of incompetence that would have been impressive if it weren't so tragic. The moisture harvester was attempting to tow collection ship number 4 to safety, but the waterlogged vessel was so heavy that the flagship's engines were straining like an elderly person trying to lift a refrigerator. Collection ship number 8 was still spinning in circles, its crew apparently unable to figure out how to shut off their malfunctioning equipment. And collection ship number 7 had become so encrusted with salt deposits that it looked like a flying crystal formation. "Dr. Frothworth," Captain Saltwater said thoughtfully, "I think we might be witnessing the worst military operation in history. I think you might be right. Should we help them?" It was a reasonable question. The aliens were clearly not hostile. They were just catastrophically unprepared for the reality of Earth's oceans. Several of their ships were in genuine distress. But before either human could make a decision, the situation took another turn for the absurd. The great white shark that had terrorized collection ship number 3 had returned, apparently curious about all the commotion. But this time, it had brought friends. A small school of sharks, attracted by the unusual activity and the possibility of food, began circling the Hydrozakian fleet with the casual interest of predators checking out a new neighborhood. To the Hydrozakians, this looked like a coordinated military encirclement by apex predators. "Admiral!" Lieutenant Dripkin shrieked, his voice reaching frequencies that only dolphins could appreciate. "We're surrounded. The natives have deployed their elite battle creatures." The elite battle creatures were actually just curious sharks doing what sharks do, investigating weird new things that had appeared in their territory. But to beings whose concept of dangerous wildlife topped out at moderately aggressive moss, the sight was terrifying. "How many hostile contacts?" Blickstorp demanded. 7, no, 8 massive predators, each one equipped with what appears to be advanced dental weaponry. The sharks, for their part, were beginning to lose interest. These strange floating objects didn't smell like food, didn't act like prey, and seemed to be leaking some kind of odd-tasting liquid. Several of them were already swimming away to find more interesting things to investigate, but Chief Tactical Officer Gurgleton was convinced they were facing a sophisticated pincer movement. "Sir, the enemy formation is repositioning. I think they're preparing for a coordinated assault." What was actually happening was that one shark had gotten bored and wandered off to investigate a school of fish, while 2 others had decided to take a nap. But the Hydrazakians were now in full panic mode, and panic has a way of making everything seem much worse than it actually is. "All ships," Blickstorp broadcast, "emergency ascension. Get out of the water. Repeat, get out of the water." The fleet began attempting to rise to the surface with varying degrees of success. The moisture harvester, being the flagship, managed a dignified if somewhat wobbly ascent. Collection ship number 6 popped out of the water like a cork from a bottle, sending startled seabirds fleeing in all directions. Collection ship number 4, however, had absorbed so much water that it couldn't achieve positive buoyancy. It was stuck approximately 10 meters below the surface, its crew pumping furiously at manual bilge systems that had never been designed for this kind of emergency. "Mayday! Mayday!" Captain Drencherson called over the radio. "We're trapped! The water has us! It has us!" From the surface, the other ships could see Collection Ship number 4's predicament, but none of them had equipment designed for underwater rescue operations. Their technology was built around water conservation, not water removal. It was at this moment that Dr. Frothworth made a decision that would change the course of interstellar relations forever. "Captain Saltwater," she radioed, "I think we need to help them." "Help them? They're aliens. Shouldn't we be calling them military? Look at them. They're not invaders. They're tourists who got in over their heads. Literally." Indeed, the Hydrazakian fleet looked less like a military force and more like a group of very lost, very wet, very frightened beings who had made some seriously poor life choices. Dr. Frothworth maneuvered her submersible toward the trapped collection ship and activated her external communication array. "Unknown vessel. This is Dr. Frothworth. Do you require assistance?" Aboard Collection Ship number 4, Communications Officer Drizzleton received what sounded to him like an offer of surrender. "Captain," he reported excitedly, "the natives are trying to communicate. I think they're offering to negotiate." Captain Drencherson, desperate enough to try anything, authorized a response. What followed was the first attempt at interspecies communication in human history, and it went about as well as you might expect. The Hydrazakian translation matrix, still calibrated for mineral-based life forms, interpreted Dr. Frothworth's offer of help as something like, "Crystalline entity demands immediate mineral tribute for territorial violation forgiveness." Dr. Frothworth's equipment, meanwhile, interpreted the Hydrozakian response as a series of whale songs mixed with what sounded like a coffee percolator having an asthma attack. But somehow, through pointing, gesturing, and the universal language of "please don't let us die," the 2 species managed to establish basic communication. Dr. Frothworth realized that the alien ship was sinking and needed help getting to the surface. The Hydrazakians realized that the local creature was offering assistance rather than demanding their surrender. What happened next would later be studied in diplomatic academies as an example of how goodwill can overcome even the most catastrophic language barriers. Dr. Frothworth attached her submersible's emergency tow cable to Collection Ship number 4 and began pulling it toward the surface. The process was slow, partly because her vessel wasn't designed for heavy lifting, and partly because the alien ship kept trying to absorb water from her hull. "Stop drinking my submarine," she radioed, though of course they couldn't understand her. But Captain Drencherson, realizing that his ship's automatic absorption systems were interfering with the rescue, managed to override them manually. Collection ship number 4 stopped trying to drink Dr. Frothworth's submersible and began its ascent toward salvation. When the ship finally breached the surface, both crews experienced a moment of profound interspecies wonder. Dr. Frothworth got her first clear look at an alien being through the collection ship's transparent dome. Captain Drencherson appeared to be roughly humanoid, but with gills, webbed appendages, and skin that had the texture of a wet seal. Captain Drencherson, meanwhile, was seeing his first human. Dr. Frothworth appeared to be a bizarre creature, encased in some kind of artificial shell, with strange appendages and what looked like artificial gills attached to her back. Both species reached the same conclusion simultaneously. That's either the strangest-looking intelligent being I've ever seen, or the most normal-looking monster. But their moment of mutual assessment was interrupted by Admiral Blixtorp's voice over the fleet communication system. "All ships, sound off! Status report!" The responses painted a picture of disaster so complete that it was almost artistic in its scope. Collection ship number 3, "Still being stalked by the prehistoric death machine, sir. It won't leave us alone." The prehistoric death machine was actually the same great white shark from before, but it had taken a liking to the ship and was following it around like a large, toothy puppy. Collection ship number 5. "Hull integrity compromised. We're covered in some kind of parasitic organisms." The parasitic organisms were barnacles, but to beings who had never encountered marine biology, they looked like some kind of alien infection. Collection ship number 6. "Navigation systems non-functional. We keep spinning toward the bright disk in the sky." They had discovered solar navigation, but their equipment wasn't designed to handle a star that bright. Collection ship number 7. "We've achieved complete crystallization, sir. The ship is now technically a mineral." Collection ship number 8. "Still malfunctioning. We can't stop spraying water." Collection ship number 9. "Under attack by flying creatures with advanced aerodynamic capabilities." These were seagulls, attracted by the ship's unusual movements and hoping for food. Collection ship number 10. "Massive system failures across all departments." Collection ship number 11. "Everything is terrible." And collection ship number 12. "Still heading toward the solar radiation source. Estimated arrival in approximately 47 years. Admiral Blixtorp listened to these reports with the growing realization that Operation Liquid Liberation had become Operation Complete Catastrophe. But the final blow to his military pride was yet to come. Captain Saltwater, having observed the rescue of collection ship number 4, made a decision that would haunt Hydrazakian military academies for generations. He activated his ship's external speakers and broadcast a message toward the alien fleet. "Attention, unknown vessels," he announced in his most official naval voice. "This is Captain Rodrigo Saltwater of the United States Navy. You appear to be experiencing difficulties. Do you require assistance?" The message was picked up by every Hydrazakian ship simultaneously. Splasherton, working frantically to recalibrate the translation matrix, managed to decode the basic meaning. "Large military vessel offering aid to distressed fleet." The bridge of the moisture harvester fell silent as the full implications sank in. Not only had their invasion failed spectacularly, but the natives they had intended to rob were now offering to help them. It was the kind of cosmic irony that would have made Douglas Adams himself proud. "Admiral," Chief Communications Officer Rippleston said quietly, "what should we tell them?" Blixtorp stared at the vast blue expanse that had defeated his entire fleet without even trying. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, completely indifferent to their presence. It was beautiful, terrible, and utterly beyond their ability to comprehend or conquer. "Tell them," he said slowly, that we seem to have miscalculated. The translation matrix did its best with this concept, and what Captain Saltwater heard was something like, "Floating moisture collectors acknowledge computational error in territorial assessment." "Did they just say they made a mistake?" Dr. Frothworth asked over the radio. "I think so. A really, really big mistake." Indeed, the Hydrazakians were beginning to understand the true scope of their error. They had come to steal water from a planet that was essentially a giant water balloon. They had prepared to fight primitive natives and found themselves dealing with a species that had already mastered the oceans they were trying to steal. But perhaps most humiliating of all, they had been defeated not by superior technology or military might, but by their own complete inability to understand the environment they were trying to exploit. The Pacific Ocean hadn't fought them. It had simply existed in all its vast, salty, life-filled glory, and their invasion had collapsed under the weight of its own absurdity. Chief Science Officer Splasherton, still running calculations, made one final discovery that put their situation in cosmic perspective. "Admiral," he reported, his voice hollow with defeat, "I've completed the analysis of this planet's total water reserves. And, sir, if we had managed to successfully drain every drop of water on this planet, and if we had been able to transport it all back to Zerothea Prime, it would have supplied our homeworld's water needs for approximately 2 billion years." The number was so large that several crew members experienced what could only be described as mathematical vertigo. 2 billion years, Blixtorp repeated softly. "Yes, sir. We came here to steal a few days' worth of water and found enough to last us until the heat death of the universe." It was at this moment that Admiral Blixtorp experienced what psychologists would later term cosmic perspective shock, the sudden realization of one's own insignificance in the face of forces beyond comprehension. But his philosophical crisis was interrupted by another message from the human vessels. "Unknown vessels," Captain Saltwater broadcast. "We're reading several ships in distress. We're prepared to offer humanitarian assistance." Humanitarian assistance. The beings they had come to rob were offering to help them. Blixtorp closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining this situation to High Command. "Admiral Blixtorp, report on Operation Liquid Liberation." "Well, sir, we discovered a planet with more water than we knew existed in the universe." "Excellent. How much did you manage to acquire?" "Approximately 12 gallons, sir. Also, we lost half our fleet, turned one ship into a salt sculpture, accidentally sent another one toward the sun, and the natives are now offering us humanitarian aid." "Come again?" "Yes, this was going to be a difficult report to write, but the immediate problem was more practical. How to get his remaining ships back to Zerothea Prime without losing any more equipment or dignity. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Frothworth, having successfully rescued collection ship number 4, was now in direct communication with Captain Drencherson. Through a combination of pictures, gestures, and increasingly sophisticated translation attempts, she had learned several important facts about the Hydrazakians. First, they were not hostile. They were just catastrophically unprepared for Earth's oceans. Second, they were from a desert world where water was incredibly scarce. Third, they were currently stuck in the middle of the Pacific with damaged ships, no understanding of local conditions, and a growing panic about various sea creatures that they perceived as monstrous predators. "Captain Saltwater," she radioed, "I think I understand what's happening here." "Enlighten me." "These aliens are from a world without oceans. They came here to steal our water, but they had no idea how much water we actually have. They're not invaders, they're like desert nomads who wandered into Niagara Falls." Captain Saltwater considered this. "So, they're not a threat." "Captain, they're afraid of dolphins. I don't think they're a threat to anything except themselves." Indeed, collection ship number 5 was currently fleeing from a group of dolphins who had decided that the strange vessel made interesting noises when they clicked at it. "So, what do we do?" Dr. Frothworth looked at the alien fleet scattered across the Pacific surface. Several ships were clearly in distress, at least one was malfunctioning, and all of them seemed to be operated by beings who were completely out of their depth, literally. "I think," she said, "we helped them get home." What followed was the most unusual rescue operation in maritime history. Captain Saltwater coordinated with the Coast Guard, the Navy, and several research institutions to provide assistance to the stranded alien fleet. The official story, for those who needed an official story, was a joint training exercise with experimental vessels. The reality was far more interesting. Dr. Frothworth used her submersible to guide the alien ships away from the busy shipping lanes and toward a quieter section of the ocean where they could attempt repairs without attracting too much attention. Captain Saltwater's vessel provided navigational assistance and served as a communication relay between the scattered Hydrozakian ships. The Coast Guard told only that there were distressed experimental vessels in need of assistance, dispatched several rescue craft without asking too many questions, and slowly, carefully, the combined human and alien effort began to achieve something resembling success. Collection ship number 4, no longer taking on water, managed to restart its engines with Dr. Frothworth's help. Captain Drencherson had learned to override his ship's automatic absorption systems, preventing further waterlogging. Collection ship number 8 finally shut down its malfunctioning aqua drainer, ending its hours-long impression of a maritime lawn sprinkler. Collection ship number 7 remained crystallized, but its crew discovered that the salt deposits had actually made their ship more structurally sound than before. They decided to consider it an upgrade. Collection ship number 3 managed to convince the great white shark to stop following them by turning off their engines and waiting for the fish to lose interest. It worked, though the crew remained convinced they had narrowly escaped death by prehistoric monster. Only collection ship number 12 remained beyond help, still heading toward the sun at maximum velocity. Its crew was resigned to their fate, though they had discovered that their food stores would last approximately long enough to reach Jupiter, where they hoped to find a gas station. As the Hydrozakian fleet slowly regrouped under human guidance, Admiral Blixtorp found himself in the unprecedented position of owing his mission's survival to the very people he had come to rob. It was, he reflected, probably not the kind of thing they taught in military academy. "Admiral," Chief Communications Officer Rippleston reported, "the natives are asking if we need additional assistance for our return journey." Blixtorp stared at the message display, trying to process the sheer absurdity of the situation. "They want to help us get home," he said finally. "Yes, sir. Apparently they're concerned about our ability to navigate in what they call deep space." Deep space. To the humans, the journey between star systems was deep space. To the Hydrozakians, who had spent most of their technological development focused on water conservation rather than space travel, it was an almost incomprehensible void. "Do we need their help?" Blixtorp asked quietly. Splasherton consulted his navigation systems, several of which had been damaged during their encounters with Earth's marine life. "Sir, our stellar cartography equipment has been compromised by exposure to magnetic anomalies." Magnetic anomalies? "The planet's magnetic field, sir. It's much stronger than we anticipated. Several of our navigation systems have been scrambled. In other words, they were lost." Admiral Blixtorp, commander of the most ambitious water theft in galactic history, was now faced with the choice between accepting help from his intended victims or wandering through space until his fleet ran out of fuel. His pride warred with his practical sense for several long moments. Practical sense 1. "Rippleston," he said wearily, "inform the natives that we would appreciate navigational assistance." The translation matrix converted this into something like, "Moisture collectors gratefully accept stellar guidance from local entities." Captain Saltwater received this message with a mixture of professional duty and barely suppressed amusement. "Dr. Frothworth," he radioed, They're asking for help getting home. Then I guess we'd better help them. And so began the first joint human-alien space mission in history, though most of the participants wouldn't realize the significance until much later. Using a combination of human astronomical data and Hydrozakian propulsion technology, the two species worked together to plot a course back to the Zerothia system. The humans provided accurate stellar positions and gravitational calculations. The Hydrozakians provided, well, mostly they provided a learning experience about what happens when you attempt interstellar exploration without adequate preparation. But slowly, carefully, the battered alien fleet began its journey home. Dr. Frothworth watched the ships disappear into the distance, their forms becoming mere points of light against the vast Pacific sky. "Think we'll ever see them again?" Captain Saltwater asked. "I doubt it," she replied. "Something tells me they've learned their lesson about trying to steal oceans." She was right, of course. The Hydrozakians would return to Zerothia Prime with a new understanding of their place in the universe, a deep respect for the dangers of inadequate research, and absolutely no desire to attempt water theft on that scale ever again. But Dr. Frothworth was wrong about one thing. They would see the Hydrozakians again, though not in the way anyone expected. 6 months later, a small Hydrozakian diplomatic vessel arrived in Earth's solar system. This time, they came not as would-be thieves, but as representatives of a species that had learned humility the hard way. They brought with them the most precious gift their civilization could offer: water purification technology developed over millennia of desperate conservation. And they brought a message from Admiral Blixtorp, who had somehow managed to spin the disaster into a story of successful first contact and mutual cooperation. The message was simple. Thank you for teaching us that the universe is much larger, much stranger, and much more generous than we ever imagined. Dr. Frothworth, reading the translated message, smiled as she remembered the sight of alien ships scattered across the Pacific like confused tourists who had taken a very wrong turn. The Hydrozakians had come to steal Earth's water and had learned instead that some treasures are too vast to steal, too dangerous to approach without respect, and too wonderful to hoard. They had discovered that the universe was not a desert to be pillaged, but an ocean to be explored with wonder, humility, and just enough sense to ask for directions when you're in over your head. And somewhere in the depths of the Pacific, a great white shark swam past the spot where collection ship number 3 had once spun in terrified circles, completely unaware that it had become the stuff of interstellar nightmares and the unwitting guardian of Earth's greatest secret, that sometimes the best defense against invasion is simply being so overwhelmingly, impossibly vast that your enemies defeat themselves trying to comprehend you.